So big welcome to students tonight to this section of the class where I'm going to go through some of the strategies for working with an action research project. And I've been talking with Kate, Talia, Amy, Isaac, Lily, Nancy and Jack about the projects that they could be choosing, and they're choosing projects from either primary or secondary or kindergarten and prep, and they're choosing them in areas particularly relating to English, or they could choose mathematics, but also other areas of interest they have, such as art and music and other topics. I'm putting up a YouTube video that goes for 45 minutes in which I introduce the subject and go through some of the material that's on Moodle. And also, I am also going to go through there some of the requirements in the subject. Now, what we're doing today is called research and action research. And so there's a strategy in research and in action research to gathering information and to writing it up that we'll introduce. We're going to meet every second Monday at this time, and we will be meeting for the hour and a half. And during this time, we'll go through some of the material that's on Moodle. You're also expected to put some time in on the odd numbers, weeks 1 to 3, and so on. And we would suggest about 10 hours a week for every subject you study, and about half of that time working on your assessment and the other half on Moodle and other materials working through. You're also expected to develop a professional portfolio, and you find some useful material that outlines the value of a portfolio in which you reflect on your teaching and you develop, and you also collect some resources and examples that you can use in a resume that you present when you're applying for a job. And you're also expected to have an observational journal where you look at the various things that can be useful when you see other students or teachers, and where you learn from them and learn from reflecting. We also have a handout which is the subject information, and so I encourage you to read through that and become familiar with the topics that we'll cover each week, and also with the assessment item that's outlined there. In other classes, you will have covered certain material relating to education, such as theories of learning and teaching, and you might want to use those here. They could be very useful in the research project that you write up. As well as this, the major assessment tasks are firstly a proposal of 2,000 words, which would include a literature review and include your methodology, include some statements regarding ethics and how you're going to go about collecting the information. So that's the proposal, 2,000 words. And then you can carry some of that material over into your project, where you carry out your research, you gather the material, and then you look at the results. You do a bit more reading of what scholars have said out there, and you write it up. And I'm sure you'll learn a lot through the research process, and that you'll gain a lot through that. A typical research project is going to have things like a literature review, and also it's going to have your methodology and all of the tasks that are involved. And so we could look at a typical literature review and then at a typical research project, and that would give you some ideas on the sort of things that you'll need to do and to cover as you go forward. Let's have a look at this resource on Bricolage, which is really just what's the method that you go about in doing your research. So you could have a look at that. So it outlines some of the methods, and then there would be other research material on methods as well that you could look at in terms of the sort of materials that you will cover in the methodology that you will use. So if we were to go to research methods, you'd find that there's a fairly typical outline of research methods, such as given here at the University of Newcastle, in that it follows a fairly typical approach in which you challenge, first of all, are you going to use a quantitative way of measuring what happens, which is where you have a questionnaire for your students and you simply get them to tick on a Likert scale what works best from 1 to 7. Many people prefer a qualitative approach where you carry out an interview and you ask the students what worked and why. Talia, can you think, why do many researchers favour the qualitative interview where you get the student to tell you for 5 minutes what's going well and why, over a survey which has this mathematical accuracy where you can say 83% said this and that, which seems to be incredibly accurate research? Why do scholars often favour a qualitative interview process, Talia?
Is it because they possibly get more favourable outcomes doing it that way, or it could be maths anxiety with the rationale, with all of that?
Yeah, I think it's because it allows you to explore more widely and more fully the possibilities, in that if you're giving a questionnaire, you've already reformulated the sort of things you're looking for, and you're less likely to discover something new. But when you've got the qualitative question, you're on the lookout for that which is surprising and counterintuitive, and that's where it's really interesting, where you get the best discoveries are those that you don't expect and they're opposite to what you expect. Whereas under the quantitative, you're often measuring the things that you are looking for. And the same with the observation. If you've got these things that you're looking for in your observation, you're only going to find what you're looking for. But if you're more open, and we're talking before about music learning, if you're sort of open to, let's try this approach to music learning, that approach to music learning, and now tell me about what were you experiencing there? You're able to discover things that are just totally hidden and not yet found. And that's why qualitative is often favoured over the quantitative as well. So that's one aspect of research methodology. And so you've got to make that choice between whether you're going to follow the qualitative and the quantitative. And you can do a bit of both as well, and that would be useful. Let's have a look now at some steps possibilities. I think there were some steps here. You've got to make the decision, as we're doing right at the beginning, as to what sort of type of research you're going to conduct, and we've been talking about that. And then you've got to come up with a methodology, how you're going to collect and analyse your data. So having come up with the topic, probably the next thing we'd do after the topic is going to be the literature review. And so you've got your topic, and then in your literature review, you want to find out as much as you can about the particular topic that you're looking at. And then after that, you want to find your method for research. So we're talking before about, say, So Kate, what were you saying before you might do your research on?
Just on
Explicit
explicit
teaching
teaching
strategies.
strategies for writing. Yeah.
Yep. For writing. And then how might you carry that out? What sort of strategy might you use, Kate?
Well, I've sneakily already started to collect some work samples because I thought it was great to catch a class at the beginning of the year before I start teaching them. So that was my first thought, to see how I can improve their structured writing is what I'm thinking, like working on paragraphs and working towards an essay style. So how I can break that down for them, help them to improve their responses. And so I'd be looking at marking those like on a similar rubric as the project goes on, to see what strategies are going to work to get to improve their writing. But I guess there's always then going to be room for me to move, isn't there? Like whether that's working or not working, whether I need to try new things that's sort of where what I've started to think of. But I've sort of started to collect some work samples as a baseline. So I'm kind of interested to talk about the ethics of that, like how that works. But I've just stuck them under my desk and thought they should come in pretty handy. Anyway.
And the easiest thing
I've got my hand up because I wanted to ask about dates, but that can wait till the end.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. We need to come back to dates. Now, with the ethics, I think one of the easiest things we can do is make it semi-anonymous. And then I guess make a commitment that whatever happens, it won't disadvantage anyone. So there's got to be a commitment to no disadvantage, and that everyone wins. So I think they're the sort of strategies ethically you'd make, is that anything you write up, anything you work with is going to be anonymous. And you may give the students either a letter name, so George is going to be A1 and Trevor will be A3 or something.
And they'll never know. They'll never see it. They'll never know.
Yeah.
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 So
and no one else will ever know. No parents will know. No one else in the universe will know. It's just totally anonymous. And then whatever happens, you're there so that every student wins, every student learns. They've all got your fullest commitment to succeed, but you are also going to be trying a number of strategies along the way that'll help them with their writing. And in those strategies, you're going to be noting that a week later, this strategy seemed to help. And so that means you're going to find some strategies along the way, and that gives you room to move. You can then research them and so on. And one of the strategies could be marking and feedback, and there could be different styles of marking and positivity and encouragement or critique in the styles of marking. And then all the way along, you're going to be doing your literature review. So the best source of literature review is going to either be the college library or Google Scholar or something like that. Yeah. And then you might have some explicit teaching strategies for structured writing. So explicit teaching strategies for structured writing. And we'll see if there's some scholars who've written on that, and then could even be some action research that's been done in that area. And then over here, we've got one here over with some students there. So if you choose some of these, if you click on Cite, CITE, you then have the resource. And if you've got 10 or 20 resources like that, then you've got a nice bibliography of scholarly resources. And then if it shows up on the right-hand side, then you can go to that article. And so here we've got some explicit writing strategies, and you can read through the article, make some notes, and then write them up in your own words. And this has also been an action research project. Notice the example here. So he's chosen a title, and then he's got details of himself. He's put an abstract in. We haven't talked much about an abstract, but you could have an abstract if you wish. He's chosen certain keywords, and so he's particularly interested in genres. And so he thinks that by trying some different genres, we could help the students to understand difference between creative writing and news writing, and he felt that would be useful. He's found Vygotsky very useful, scaffolding useful, writing competency useful. And then the introduction you could in fact write at the very end, but you could write a dummy introduction now. And then the literature review is where you're going to be gathering the material on your topic, and you could write 4,000 words but edit it down to 2,000 words that you hand in, or 1,000 words or whatever. The literature review, you're initially gathering all this material and putting it together. So a lot of that is his literature review. And then
So
he's
did
got
I
his
hear you say
project.
with the literature review, am I hearing you right that the literature review that we submit in the 2,000 words can be reworked
Yep.
into the final proposal? We can reuse that material.
Absolutely, because a
Okay.
lot of it, a third of it or more of what happens hinges on the literature review.
Cool.
And that's the skill that you carry forward with you for the rest of your life, is this literature review. And as you say, with your 2,000 words, 1,000 or more could be your literature review. And you may, in fact, end up with 3,000 word literature review, and you only give me 1,000 words in the proposal, but the rest of it you carry over. And yeah, I think you can use almost whatever you want from your proposal in your final project, and rework it and change it and abandon it and do all that sort of thing.
And that'll be a good opportunity for feedback from you. Like the proposal is a good opportunity for feedback before we march ahead into the report. Yeah.
And in that literature you review, you want some major theories about learning your area. You want the major concepts, you want some major thinkers, and the ideas that they have there in that literature review. So your ideas will then flow out of that. And it's not a bad idea if you have some conflict in that. So there could be differing ideas. So that's can in fact strengthen the whole project if you've got different ideas and different things happening. You could also have some of your own thoughts and reflections. The great danger is that the person who's written the literature review material has put 10 years of scholarly research into it, and you've put 10 hours of some moderate thinking into it. And so your scholar tends to know a lot more than you do. But at the same time, you've got to take ownership of your ideas, in that that's what the life journey is about. So I think you've got to wrestle with your own thoughts and reflections, and that's the growth process, isn't it? Is where you interact with these major theories, major thinkers, and come up with original things never thought before by anyone else. They're your thoughts only, and that's because they're untrue. But
well, also I feel like it's, a lot of the theorists have not been in the classroom in the last 10, 15, 20 years, when life has changed considerably, hasn't it? So they are able to be reapplied in this context. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the strength as the scholar is that he's put the time into the scholarship, but then again, he's not got the raw data that only you have from studying 10 students or 20 students. And so, and then you've got to come up with your method. And as you said, Kate, if you've got some standard things, and then you come up with ideas that you're going to implement, and then you come up with the new writing, and then again, it's all autonomous. There's no record of who wrote it in one sense, but you compare A1 now with A1 back at the beginning of the year, and you say this strategy helped there. Talia, your thoughts on your project?
Yeah, I'm thinking through, as Kate's speaking, I'm thinking through some of the whole school assessments that have been done. I didn't realize that this was happening, but they have had an aspect of phonological awareness and testing the kids. Basically, this was done at the start of the year to work out where the aids are most needed. But I could use some of that data, or I could look at, say the kindy classes. There's 3 kindy classes at Cedars. I could look at the scores for those and find the students that were the lowest on those phonological awareness skills. And then based on whatever research I find is the most, I guess, the common ways of working on that, put that into place, and then see if there's any difference working in that, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like
love
my
it.
mind is exploding tonight, but
Yeah, that is so good. I mean, as you said, you got this wonderful data which tells you the low scores. Then you've got the literature review that tells you the common ways of working on that. And then you approach these wonderful case studies, which are students. And Talia, just curiosity for a couple of seconds, what are 2 or 3 reasons why some children can't get a phonological concept?
well,
Or
that
is
is
it
a
way
good
too
question.
complex?
It is from what I remember, and honestly, like I said, I studied this at uni, but then in
Yes.
practice, there was such a desperate need for speech pathologists that I worked in a hospital, and there were very strict rules on, you saw a patient for this many sessions only, and if they came out on a language assessment as only having phonological awareness issues, then that was not a top priority, and you would refer them off. Private therapists could work on that till the cows come home if they want to, but we weren't allowed to. So I have not done a lot of actual work with students that have these issues, but now I see it when they're coming out with their poor reading skills. And I think the way that we've been taught at school in the ways that we decode words is incorrect based on the research. But in terms of, there's a top-up processing and a bottom-up or top-down, there we go, bottom-up or top-down processing that's happening neurologically based on when you see a word, whether you understand that word, whether you can work out context cues, whether you can look at the sounds and try and guess a word. There's so much happening in a brain. But yeah, there's different, it could be a language processing, it could be an auditory processing. It's massive. And now I've started on this, open this can of worms. I feel like, oh my gosh, what am I doing?
Well, now one of the things you can do as well, Talia, is when you get too much material, there could be ways that we can work with that. One way is certainly appendix. And so with appendix, you can just, and footnotes is another. And so when you've got these wonderful resources that you want to sort of keep in touch with, then come up with ways of keeping in touch with 100,000 words of solutions without sort of losing connection with it, and you can just have a one sentence that says a great explanation of. And then of course the big booming field in the last 10 years is neuroscience.
Yes,
and
definitely.
That's just breaking through. So if you found a couple of insights from there, that would be really good. Amy, what are your thoughts now on how things go forward?
I don't know. I learnt what the word methodology meant a week ago when I first clicked on this Moodle. So I feel very out of my depth. I have no idea. I think that trying to measure creativity will be very challenging. And I think that the subjective nature of art is challenging in lots of reasons. in lots of spaces, and that will carry into this as well. So I have no idea.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great starting point in both English writing and also in visual arts and everywhere. You've got this question of what is creativity. Can I just share, Amy? We're driving down the highway the other day and I noticed one car that had had a bump, and one side of the car was a little bit higher than the other, than right-hand side and the left-hand side. And I thought, why are all cars so symmetrical? There's no creativity on the road. They've all got four wheels. And, I mean, cars should be sort of fluid form. It's no creativity out there at all. And no creativity with accountants either. They're not creative. It's but I'm off track, but yeah.
Yeah, so I'm
It's
thinking, and as you were talking about Kate and Talia's, I was just, yeah, running it through my head. I think that yeah, looking at somehow increasing the content knowledge of art history for a group, and then having a control group. And so one group has better understanding of where their art practice sits within art history, has increased meta language to be able to then communicate their ideas and communicate their creative ideas. I think that that's a big stumbling block for a lot of students, is they have really great ideas, they just don't have the right words to talk about them. And so yeah, somehow having one group that just does what they would normally do, and then having another group where history and theory and language is put in, and then seeing how that affects their ability to create work, like create physical artworks.
I think the difficulty is an ethical one, in that if you're helping half the students and not helping the other, then there's an ethical problem. But one solution would be to help one group first, and then swap it over.
Yeah, I was thinking
help
that.
the other group, and that way they both get a chance. And when they and then you share with them, this is what happens. And so if you explore creativity without some language guidelines and words, and then explore creativity with language guidelines and words, and so you could introduce them to, say, surrealism, and then suddenly they can discover a whole heap of things when they're introduced to surrealism, or you introduce them to perspective and they've got a whole heap of things that they can work with. But without the content knowledge of art history, then they don't have so much to work with. So yeah, I think I really love that sentence. They have great ideas, but do not have the right words to talk about them. And so I think if you can introduce those, that'd be great. Isaac, what are your thoughts then on what you might run with?
Yeah, I'm a little bit the same. We're just a lot to think about, a lot going on, and I don't consider myself a very natural, traditional academic in any terms. But I guess my thoughts kind of immediately just go to essentially like the data collection, or the kind of assessing, the outcomes and the progress, specifically within a creative medium, like giving something success criteria. I don't know, it can be quite a hard thing. Like, I feel like the methodology is something I can really get behind, and the different ways to approach something and comparing them, but actually being able to look at the success criteria within a creative art, I think, is something that can be quite difficult. And I feel like I'm thinking through all of this conversation and going, I feel like it has to be a mix of actual outcomes and data and how things compare, but also almost the student's own journey and how they feel about something, or whether, say, if I was comparing to kind of methods within music learning, actually having some sort of conversation-based feedback at the end, where it's like, do you feel like you've missed something going with this approach? How do you feel you've gone, like, I don't know, just kind of including that into data, which I don't know how that works necessarily, but that's just kind of where my head's going at the moment.
Yeah, and I guess you've got to make a decision, Isaac, as to whether to run with the music, and I guess there's a lot of value in that, or whether there are other areas to run with. What's the advantage of running with music as opposed to running with English media arts or other areas for yourself going forward?
I mean, it's something. It's more about the one. It's the area I'm passionate about, and I've kind of within my work. The reason I took this job is because the music teacher's retiring. So my plan is to have a music program to run basically starting next year. So I'm just taking kind of some subjects so they could get me into the school. So I'm really kind of looking forward into something that I'm passionate about and I'd like to be doing and implementing, but I just might not be there yet. I have one small medium where I can kind of get data from and put into practice, but hopefully in the future a lot more.
And you've got all of those associated, as we were talking before, about sort of free learning and etc., as opposed to very formal learning in music, haven't you? And so there's a whole heap there. And then I guess you've got to come up with how will you measure what you provide and how will you analyse it? One way to go is to have different groups in your class whereby you introduce something to one group, but then 2 weeks later, in order for equity, you introduce it to the other group and you just sort of see how they respond to 2 or 3 different approaches. So that's one way to go. Lily, do you have thoughts on your project?
Sort of. I guess taking writing samples, and looking at case studies and other action research projects, and yeah, just helping the students to write stories and then reflect on their own stories, and sort of critique themselves and then develop that story again using their own feedback or the feedback from the teacher.
I think it'd be really
Excellent.
interesting. Sorry, with the creative writing, I think it'd be really interesting I can't see Lily's face, but to look at the nature of the rubric, because I feel like the rubrics look really uniform across, well, the rubrics I'm looking at in, like structured writing, in a novel study or something, but for creative writing, imaginative writing, it'd be really interesting to look at how using a different style of rubric would impact the outcomes. I think that would be a really interesting, because we get set on these set ways of assessing kids, but actually introducing some more creative ways to assess creative writing could give you a different outcome for the student. Does that make sense? Like to redesign the rubric to be more suited to the task.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's right. You could also you could explore also the different ways that they can interact with other students. So peer interaction could help. Self-reflection. You could think about ways in which they reflect on their own stories and critique themselves. What sort of stimulus would help them there? And as you said, Kate, this whole method of assessment, what approaches to assessment really help them going forward? Because there's some methods of assessment just close students down, don't they? They make them feel less about themselves and they won't go back to it if they feel crushed by the assessment.
Well, even
Further
we're being
thoughts,
told
Kate?
that, we're just being taught that collaboration and peer editing and going through those processes are incredibly helpful to students internalizing their learning, but you never see those aspects of learning integrated into the rubric. The rubric is always very mechanical about the style of writing and the use of grammar and those like how they address the question, they're always based on the actual literature. They're not based on the process that kids go through to produce a creative piece of writing. And I just think that if you designed a rubric that incorporated those things, it would actually benefit some kids who would learn better going through those collaborative processes in peer groups. Anyway, that's just a thought that I'm having that would be interesting to see.
I really like that idea of a rubric which would say things like, works well with peers to better understand their writing process or something like that.
Yeah, or
rather
receives
than-
feedback,
Yes.
receives feedback and responds to feedback from, from a peer editing process. It actually forces kids
Yes.
into the situation where they have to go through that process. It
Yes.
makes them vulnerable, but that is seen as best practice, but it's not actually something that we assess kids on that aspect of the process of writing. So I think that would be great.
And that's so much better than a rubric that says accurate punctuation, accurate construction of paragraphs and things, which
100%.
students find, it's scary, threatening.
Especially for creative writing, because in creative
Yes.
writing, you kind of want to cut them loose to come up with something outside the box. So,
yes. And you find the same with, say, poetry or something, is that if it's all critical analysis rather than the free-flowing poetic, then they're just going to be turned off poetry rather than invited into it. Nancy, what are your thoughts and ideas?
Yeah, I'm thinking about mentioning also the social skills part, like when kids don't know English and they struggle at school, they come from houses where English is not their first language. And I'm thinking of mentioning the difficulties they face, like social skills, when they feel like they're excluded at school. What else? Like they can't express themselves. They struggle with expressing themselves. Yeah.
I think the challenge will be to narrow it down in that there's so many areas that can be explored, such as the home school connection, the family connection. There's a lot of areas to explore there. And I guess it's a matter of doing some reading around English as second language learning and refugee challenges, and then deciding what's going to be the way you'll work with that. Now, of course, you can interview some students and find out what do they see as the challenge. So that's a research project in its own right, as to say, what are the major challenges? And again, if you do this in a qualitative way and you've got these interviews which are largely anonymous in that you're just getting these students to describe the challenges they face, that's one step. And then being action research, you then introduce some solutions, and then that's the second step. So that's very valuable. Jack, what are your thoughts going forward?
Hi. Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I think, just from contemplating tonight, and so I teach 3 days a week at St. Philip's, teaching Christian life studies and a bit of sport, just while I'm finishing my master's. And something that I found really interesting, and a bit of a passion of mine, is teaching with purpose, having clear objectives, clear goals, and clear purposes for each lesson that I teach. And I remember when I was in school, a lot of times I'd be sitting in maths or sitting in English, wondering why am I learning these things? And now that I'm older, I know the purpose, but it's just, I think, expressing that to kids and to students. And I think I'd really like to kind of go down that kind of rabbit hole of research to explore the power of purpose in teaching and purposeful teaching. and then kind of seeing links between that and explicit instruction on how we can be really explicit of this is what we're learning and why we're learning it, how you can use it in your life, how you can use it to grow yourself, grow your knowledge. Yeah, and just involving the students in those conversations. I in class just the other day, I was we're looking at the movie Bruce Almighty, just as a fun little segment for year 9. And there was that scene where he had a conversation with God, and at the end of the lesson, I got the students to write a letter to God, asking him any questions, asking him anything. And the feedback I got, they could do it anonymously, so they could say whatever they wanted to. And it was actually really powerful. And once they finished writing that letter, I had them write a letter to me on what they want the purpose of class to be and what they want to get out of it. And again, it could be anonymous. So there were some colorful things written, but for the most part, they were actually really genuine. And so I think just when students are involved in knowing and being a part of developing the reasons for what they're learning and why they're learning it, I think there's a lot of power there that I'd like to press into.
That sounds great. I really like that title, Exploring the Power of Purposeful Teaching. And as an active research task, you could share with them, this is what you see, explicit instruction, growing yourself, growing your knowledge. And then you'd ask for feedback from them, this qualitative feedback, and you would say, and now what does this mean to you? And they could write it down as you say. So I think that would be very, very valuable. So I think there's plenty there to explore, and I think that will go very, very well. So
wonderful.
I think you will do very well with that. Just going through now some of the things that you will have to do, and you'll see this on the Moodle, is you've got to select the people you're going to work with. You've got to prepare an ethics form in which you consider the ethical concerns, and you'll see that available on the website. You prepare a draft introduction, and then you write up what you're doing. And particularly important at this stage, I think, is the literature review, in that you can almost change your topic. But the one thing that you do want at the moment is quality literature by quality scholars. And so if you take the time to go to Google Scholar, type in your area of interest, find 2 or 3 or more scholars, start to read their papers and gather their information on the topic you're interested in. That'll lead you forward. You'll gather information. On the Moodle webpage, you'll see that you're looking for a proposed title, and we can come back to that. Write a draft title now. You've got a few weeks to change the title a few times. Think about your context, who you're working with, what age group, etc. And then particularly important at this stage over the next few weeks is the literature review. So look for a survey of the key ideas in the area you're looking at. Think about your method. That is, you're going to ask the students about what they're doing. Think about the ethics. That is, you don't want to disadvantage anyone. Everyone's a winner. You don't want to prejudice anyone, so it can be anonymous. Do all of those things that you can on the way through. If you've not done a personal introduction on the Moodle website, I encourage you to go there, and that's an opportunity to tell us a bit about yourself. So that would be very useful as well. Give some thought to the time management, so you can think through drawing up a calendar of how many weeks you've got and what you hope to get done in that time. Think which days have the sort of hours that you want to work on. Think about how this is going to be rewarding and beneficial to you. so that this will encourage you to put in the time, because even if you only hand in 30% or 50% of the material that you gather, you've still got this other discovery material that'll be helpful along the way. So think about how you can most benefit from what we are doing. So on the Moodle website, you'll have an outline of what we're looking at. So there's the title, there's the context, what's your background, there's the literature review, which is collecting 10, 15, 20 scholars who've written on the area you're interested in. And if they've got different viewpoints, then that's even better, because it challenges you to think about these areas. The more you can narrow down what you're looking at, probably the better. There's a tendency for us to try and go too broadly, but if you can narrow down what you're looking at, the better. Think a bit about your methodology. Why are you approaching the task in the way that you are? And then the ethics statement, you have to fill in that. We encourage you with the ethics to briefly read through the policy and application form and look into the whole ethics question a bit. And then going forward, the big project is going to be where you fill it all in to complete the work that you are doing. But we'll talk more about that as we go along. It's a very doable task that you are doing, in that it's firstly a task in which you are going to select a topic that you are interested in, and then you're going to do a literature review. You're going to find out what some people have written, and so you've got a topic. And then the literature review really guides how things go forward. And that's the great discovery. The scholars have told you something very valuable about where you are going to be investigating. And we want at least 10 to 15 to 20 scholarly resources, realizing that you'll begin with one and you'll read that. And then after that, you'll probably have 2 to 3, and even then you might still have your own favourite one, and then another one you might only read a little bit of. But eventually you're putting this together, and then you might have 2 or 3 on method, and you might have 2 or 3 on teaching and pedagogy and that sort of thing. So there's a few other resources that'll come in along the way. You might want to look at some of the New South Wales education materials, or if you're teaching in another state, look at some of the materials there, and some of the online materials, and you might want to quote that and what the curriculum's about. You might want to reflect in terms of context a little bit on the context of your school. Where's it set? What's the location? You might want to reflect context on you. That is, where are you in the journey of life and teaching, and how does that fit in? I'm quite happy for you to write a page of gazing at yourself and saying you are on this journey, and you can write a little bit about that as well. And in the same way, you could write about the future, how these things might fit in with the future. But one of the major tasks we're focusing on is literature review. And then one of the other tasks that we're focusing on is methodology. And at this stage, it's probably going to be something like interview, or, as a few of you have said, if you've got writing samples then that's terrific. You've got a sample before, and then you've tried a method, and then you've got a sample afterwards. You've got a comparison there. And you can always ask the students, why did you write this way? Why did you write that way? And one thing that we do use sometimes is we audio record. I mean, you could also video record, and then you could say this is going to be wiped and never seen, I suppose. I wonder whether a video is more ethically challenging than an audio recording. The challenge is I suppose the other way is to write notes where you get them, and possibly we can write fast enough and we ask them to say what
We can
worked for
voice
you.
to text now. We can voice to text. We can
Yes.
talk, and our computer will type for us.
Yes.
While we're talking. Yeah.
Yes. You could actually do that, couldn't you? You could.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So I'm
So what
just
sort
looking
of?
at I'm just looking at the rubric for this first task. So it looks like about 60% is the literature review, 20% methodology, 20% kind of worldview overview. That's sort of
Yep.
what you're looking for in the 2,000 words, that sort of
Yep.
balance. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the rubric guides sort of the importance and how much time and effort you'll put in. And the literature review is so valuable for discovering the insights that are out there. Now, the point to make is if you were to go to Wikipedia, that would be a no-no. And because with Wikipedia, you don't know who it is, you don't know where they are, you know nothing about the author. Whereas if you go to anything on, and even if you go to a web page, you often can't find who the author is. But whenever you go to Google Scholar and you put in action research in primary English, the moment you go to one of these resources, you've got the name of the author, you've got the Journal of English and Education, you know everything. You could work out their background. And so scholarly resources are a must. And the best scholarly resources are going to be very valuable as well. Any questions about literature review or methodology?
My question is, would you write this like a proposal, or would you expect it to be like in a formal essay style, or would you how would you like the proposal to be formatted? Or you're not fussy?
Yeah, I think a little bit like the scholarly articles that we read.
Just looked at,
yeah. So the standard scholarly article sort of gives you that feel.
The layout,
Yeah.
And so the ethics form is completely separate. That's just attached to the back of our proposal.
Yeah, and I think you could have a paragraph or half page in your proposal. So these days they often have an abstract at the front. You don't have to. Certainly an introduction is standard in everything where you introduce what you were saying. With the introduction, I generally like some scholars cited, but 50% of people don't like any scholars cited in the introduction. Kate, what are your thoughts on the citing of scholars in the introduction?
I have never cited a scholar in my introduction because, I think to me, it's a signpost of where it's going, but I'm super happy to do that because obviously the ideas are coming from somewhere. So if that's what you like, that's what you're going to get. Yeah.
Yeah. I think because the ideas come from somewhere, and because when you're engaging with other scholars, it makes you look as though you're in dialogue with them from the start. If you include the scholars in the introduction, then I think you are showing more academic engagement with scholars and writings. Whereas I can see what you're saying, Kate, if you're outlining where you're going, that works fine. But I think the more scholars you engage with,
Better.
the better the material. And then you've got to choose what the little sub areas are that you look at. This one's got a whole discussion on what action research is. And then they've got a discussion on the purpose of their project, what they're setting out to do. And then they've got a discussion of the methodology. And so you discuss what sort of method you're going to use. And again, you usually cite scholars, though when you do methodology, you may actually be citing less scholars sometimes, but I think it doesn't take too long to grab some scholars and put them into your discussion with the methodology. You then, if you've got a questionnaire or if you've got qualitative discussion, you can have some further discussion of that. And then you're not going to be into the results at this stage because this is the proposal. You could have a section on what you expect to happen. So you could have a little discussion of what we expect may happen in your proposal. You could have a discussion of what I could learn from this, what are some of the benefits from this. That could all go in the proposal. So, yeah, I think following the sort of format that you see in scholarly journal articles such as those that you find in any scholarly journal article is, and it's such a different style of writing to a more popularist journal or a more and a news article, etc. It's a very standard format for scholarly journal articles. Any other questions?
I have two questions. One is really simple. So with the dates that you've laid out, normally there's a teaching break over the 4-week prac in May. And so weeks 12 and the last 2 dates are usually at the other end in June. So
yes.
Is that your...
Yes, I think we'll run with that, as you say, because week 12 becomes... And what did you say week 12 is now? What's the date in June? About the 20...
I'm not sure, but like all of May is almost out for everybody's got like a 4-week, well, they shut down teaching 4-week prac block, and then there's usually at least one more lecture after that, which will be helpful if we're all getting right to the end of that process. Also, I just wanted to clarify the comment in the Moodle shell about linking with the TPA, because it's saying it will be helpful towards that, and I'm not clear on how that contributes to the TPA or links to the TPA. Have you?
Yeah, I haven't given much thought to that. So
okay, that would be a really helpful thing to know from AC, because it looks like we do have to document in the TPA. We have to follow 3 different students and document their progress. And so if what I'm doing now, well, for me, but for people who are teaching regular classes, if that actually lines up, it will actually save a lot of duplication when we get to that final prac.
Yes.
So I wonder whether you might be able to talk to the course convener about what they are thinking that could look like, because it would be really helpful to know that up front. You know,
yeah, that's a great idea. Has anyone else got any thoughts on that? Anyone given it any more thoughts? No. Otherwise, we can work on that, Kate. That sounds good. Any other questions?
Can we change our subject? Like if we've thought about it more, is it final what we said today, or we can change it?
Yes, you can change it, and certainly you can make a lot of changes in the first couple of weeks. Obviously, you'll then be investing time into your literature review. So after about 3 weeks or so, you'll be wanting to make fewer and fewer changes simply based on the amount that you've invested already into it. So I think it's worth narrowing today the area you're going to do your literature review in, and then it's worth putting at least 5 to 10 hours into your literature review each week now going forward, building the literature review in particular and giving some thought to your methodology, in that the strength of your understanding of what you're interested in and what you're doing and what you're researching could come out of that literature review, couldn't it? Now, you can keep adding to your literature review over the next 12 weeks, and you can keep changing your ideas. You might have one idea and you might go 180 degrees to something entirely the opposite, but you want to keep moving roughly forward in that same direction so it all contributes. Yeah. So we meet again in 2 weeks' time, same place. If you have any questions between now and then, feel free to email me. If you have a draft idea and you think this is what I'm working on, then feel free to email some ideas through and I can give you some feedback on that. But your ideas sound very interesting. I think you'll enjoy it, you'll do well, you'll get a lot of value out of it, and it'll also introduce you to action research that you can use in your teaching for years and years ahead as well, that'll be valuable going forward. So I look forward to seeing you all in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you.